Hi, I'm Bronwen and I work for Off the Record. We are a youth mental health service based in Bristol. And in this series of videos, I've been chatting about different aspects of being resilient and also what we can do to help kind of boost those different qualities. The one that we're going to talk about today is called self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is a term that gets used sort of a reasonable amount in things like psychology. If any of you do A-level psychology, you probably will come across it. And it often gets confused with self-esteem. Now, they are sort of related in that when you build or boost your self-efficacy, your self-esteem will grow, but they're not the same thing. So self-efficacy is our knowledge about ourselves that makes us think that actually that we can grow and change, so that we can do things in our lives that will actually affect our future and how we feel about ourselves. So it's almost like being your own advocate. And self-efficacy comes from experience. So when we go through things in the past, when we have experiences that are challenging or, just kind of stretch us in different ways, that helps us to then be able to predict that we're going to be able to do hard things in the future. So I might have, when I was at school, done something like, I don't know, an outward bound course or something like that, where I had to kind of go and do lots of climbing and challenging things outside my normal school environment. And in that situation, I probably felt, I did feel quite scared. I remember, like that feeling of your heart really beating, almost feeling like you're going to panic. But there were certain qualities, certain aspects of me, and also things that were in the environment around me that helped get me through that situation. Now, that was something that happened when I was 14, 15, but I can use that knowledge and have used that knowledge to get me through various other situations and to know that I probably can get through other situations. So I almost can predict that something is going to go okay, or I'm going to survive that particular scenario. So I remember when I went to do my driving test for the third time, and I had that same experience of my heart beating in my chest and feeling very breathless, feeling quite panicky. And then I was able to think back to that experience when I felt like that before, and what were the strengths in me, what were the qualities in me that I could draw on in that situation that was going to help me get through that driving test. And dear listeners, I did pass on my third time. I am a very good driver, just like to point that out. So self-efficacy is really useful, because if we don't have that for ourselves, then we don't think that we can get through situations. We predict instead that we are going to fail, that we are going to make a mistake, that things are not going to go right for us. So self-efficacy is really important. It's kind of like the difference between that realistic optimism that we talked about and just being like, well, the world is always rubbish, everything's always unfair, what is the point of me even trying? So you can see that it makes a really big difference. And the more you use self-efficacy, the more you get into the habit of using it, then it does boost your self-esteem, because you start to feel good about yourself when you realise that you can actually do things and make changes. So self-efficacy is super important, and it is quite clearly related to strengths. So knowing what personal qualities you've got that you can draw on in those difficult and challenging times, that will be really useful. Now, strengths are really, really interesting and really fun to think about, because actually there are certain strengths that kind of probably everyone could name and that get a bit more of a good PR job than other strengths. So lots of people would say things like, bravery or confidence or, being outgoing, all those kinds of strengths, hardworking, determined, perseverance. These kind of words get used a lot in our culture and in the world that we live in. And I find particularly lots of young people, when we talk about this, they feel that if they don't have the strength of confidence, then somehow all of the other things that they've got that are really brilliant about them don't count. So why are some strengths valued more than others? Because actually things like being gentle and humble and kind are super useful strengths. If you think about it, if someone has those kind of strengths, those sort of maybe quieter strengths, they are really, really, really handy, especially in terms of like building connection and linking with other people and being just a nice person to be around, which is going to help us in lots of situations. So some strengths tend to get a bit more of a bigger press. because they're maybe a bit louder and a bit more kind of obvious. And some strengths are a bit quieter, and we need to think a bit harder about whether we've got them and actually to really value them as well. Because actually, if we all had the same strengths, if we were all brave and confident and outgoing, it would be quite a loud and maybe slightly weird world to be in. We need people who are also calm, patient, all those kind of other more nurturing type strengths. And the other problem that often happens as well is that the strengths that we have might not relate to the kind of role that we think we have. So when I do this session, when we look at strengths, we talk a lot about strengths that are sort of stereotypically valued in one gender or another, or to do with age, or to do with all sorts of different things. And it's quite interesting seeing the results, because quite often we see that there are certain strengths that are valued, for example, in men or in women. And yet, if you're a man and a woman and those aren't your strengths, you've got some other ones that are over here, then it can make you feel quite uncomfortable. So valuing your strengths, really knowing what your strengths are, is super important. And they might be things like being playful or funny. They don't have to be kind of like serious things. There are lots of different ways and lots of different strengths that are useful in different situations. So self-efficacy is something that we can use to boost our self-esteem, and we get it from thinking about what we've done in the past, what strengths we used, what got us through, and then applying that to knowing what we're going to be able to do in the future. So it's kind of like looking into your crystal ball and saying, actually, I'm going to be okay because I am, and whatever your strengths are. So what I'd like you to do is maybe over the next week, have a think, what are your strengths? So not your skills. I don't want to know like whether you're an amazing footballer or a fantastic artist or anything like that, although those are all wonderful things. I want to know, are you creative? Are you patient? Are you kind? Are you determined? Are you humble? I'll leave the rest to you. So have a think, what are your strengths? What things can you draw on when times are tough? What can you use? I am using a lot of my sense of humour at this particular moment, and it's very, very, very interesting seeing which strengths are useful and which ones maybe aren't in different scenarios. So I look forward to hearing how you've got on thinking about your strengths. Next week, we're going to be thinking about empathy, which is lovely. I hope you're all well and coping. Please reach out. Have a look at all the different things that Off the Record are doing online, but also maybe sign up to one of our closed groups so you can have a bit more of a proper chat and talk through what's going on for you. It's lovely to speak to you all, as always. Bye.